Yeah.
How do you follow that?
I can't follow that, but what do you do? It's not very often when you get to be moderator for 4 women, it's not very often that you can tell 4 women what to do. Let's see how that goes. In your material, but I'll tell you a little bit about Aimee, just because I like the privilege as moderator to pick and choose what I want to talk about. Okay. Yay! Yeah. Aimee was educated at the University of the Philippines and also at Columbia with Masters of Public Health. If I say anything wrong, please correct me right away, Aimee. Basically, she's a community organizer. She works with the Filipino communities, works with Asians, immigrants, women of color, works with APAN. When she's not doing all this, she likes to go to musical theaters, and she has one time involved in an experimental theater group back in college. So, if you'd like to say a little bit of that, you can request when she comes out here. Aimee, your turn.
10 years ago. And that was a very seminal moment in my life in coming over here to the United States, because they made me feel welcome and they made me feel a part of the community. What I'm now proud to say is that I was actually not a very good history student. I found it very dull to memorize history and facts and figures. And it wasn't until I was in UP, when I was taking History 10, I had Professor Rico Azicate, and he told me that history, the accurate word of history in Filipino is nagbibigay saysay, right? So literally to give meaning. So it's not actually, as we've been traditionally taught, as a mere reporting of events. It's actually illuminating and giving value and giving meaning to the events and how they shape our lives. Allowed me to bring fried chicken to the protesters. But really, how could you not be swept up by that movement? Because it was such a powerful movement. And it was such a global phenomenon that it really captured my moral imagination and planted the idea that yes, the Filipino is worth dying for. So, as a teenager, you really cannot ask for a more dramatic backdrop to your adolescence than the EDSA revolution happening behind you. So when I entered the University of the Philippines, which at the time already had a reputation for building thinkers and actors and doers, I was really keen to be a part of something bigger than myself. But even as I had fire in my belly, I was also kind of painfully shy. You know, as you can understand, I grew up constantly hearing, maitim ka, pangu ka, piki ka, masyado ka matangkad. So I had very limited self-esteem. But thankfully, there were people who took an interest in me and welcomed me and invited me and recruited me to be part of a theater group that considered itself kind of revolutionary. It wanted to challenge the colonized and kind of the colonial mentality that most Filipinos had. We wanted to create homegrown performance pieces that really spoke to the Filipino experience and not just perform something that was established from Broadway or from Hollywood. And my director at the time, Aurelio Solito, who's actually quite well-renowned right now, and our faculty advisor, who was the famous playwright Rogelio Sicat, created a performance piece for myself and for a friend of mine, Rowena Basco, that was about the lives of two women who were polar opposites living under the cruel dictatorship. We called it Mayamang Babae, Pobreng Babae. And it became such a powerful and popular performance piece that we performed it everywhere, inside the classrooms, in the hallways, by the restaurants, in the clubs. Anyone who called and asked for us, we would be there. And in fact, one of my seminal moments was performing this in front of House Representative Aimee Marcos. Of course, I was giving her dagger looks. I was trying to make her think that this is about you, this is about you.
But she was oblivious.
And one of my most memorable performance pieces was in 1992 when we did a rock musical called Manhid. And it was specifically created to highlight the apathy and the indifference that Filipinos had for their country, and kind of like our desperate attempts to become American. And one of our signature songs was Gusto Ko Maging Puti. And the context for this musical was that it was a time when we were trying to decide as a country what we were going to do with the US military bases. And our clamor at the time was to evict the US military bases because we believed that they were a threat to both national security and our sovereignty as an independent and free nation. So it was an incredibly powerful experience performing this musical at night and then in the morning going to the rallies to demand for change, which eventually we did. We were able to push the Senate to end the US military presence in the Philippines. So the lesson that I learned from this period of my life is that every generation is called to respond to the issues of our time. And that I had a choice. I had a choice to either sit it out, or I had a choice to engage and lend my voice to something that was bigger than myself. And you know, when this was happening, I was barely out of my teens. And so I was also trying to figure out who I was, and then also trying to respond to these national issues. And I kept running headlong into the things, probably not really thinking things out. I probably didn't do the smartest things all the time. I probably didn't do the most strategic things. But what I can learn from my early self at this time was that I tried. And then I think that's an important lesson for young people and for everyone to learn, is that in the end, we need to keep engaging the world around us, and that we can't sit things out, that we need to be a part of the conversation about what kind of world we want to grow up in. And I think this has made all the difference in my life, as eventually I would experience inequality, injustice, violence, and indifference. So needless to say, after college, after I had come from being a shy person to performing in front of Aimee Marcos, I thought I was a cat's meow. Alam mo kung sino ako. So, I was in for a very rude awakening. After college, my very first job was as a community organizer. And it was working with a non-governmental organization called HASIC, Harnessing Self-Reliant Initiatives and Knowledge. And we worked with urban poor communities in District 2, along Commonwealth Avenue. So for those of you who are familiar with Commonwealth Avenue, it goes right across a little barangay called Payatas. For those of you who've seen Slumdog Millionaire, the slum areas there, the shanty towns, that's a visual picture of what it looks like. It's notorious for being a village built around a mountain of garbage. I looked at the women beside me who were holding my hand, and they had such a deep sense of conviction in their faces. They stood their ground with such courage that it was a very humbling moment, that I realized that I could learn so much from these women. These women who from the outskirts are destitute, are impoverished, are not highly educated, but who have such wisdom and such determination and such conviction. And I think that day we did stop the bulldozer. And years later, we were able to pass that legislation that would give them rights and solutions. And then I think the third period that I want to draw from is my own immigration story. And I often get the question, what is someone who worked to get the US military bases out of the Philippines doing in the US? And the simple question is, the simple answer to that is that I followed the boy, right? So I married a Peace Corps volunteer, we ended up having a baby, we came here to Portland. And quickly within that first year here in Portland, my marriage unraveled and I experienced domestic and emotional violence. And for most of my life, I've been working on domestic violence issues. But when it was happening to me, I couldn't see it, and I couldn't name it, and I couldn't recognize it. So it took another Filipino friend who was also going through domestic violence to be able to explain it to me and get me help. And so as you can imagine, this characterized and defined my very early years of immigrating to the US. I saw immigration as a series of big and small humiliations, trying to figure out how to navigate systems, trying to get safety for myself, trying to get custody for my son. And it was often terrifying, often trying to figure out what the names, the terms, the people that I would need to know to be able to access resources. And it was probably the darkest, the scariest, and the loneliest time of my life. I was a single mom with a year-old son living in a city where I had no family or friends. And the only way I really got through that was through the help of kind strangers, fellow Filipinos who had come before me, and a network of advocates and activists who use their privilege and their status to help people in need. So that when I eventually got stronger and I was able to stand on my own feet and began rebuilding my own family, I finally got to a place where I could look at and open myself to the gifts that these people were offering me. And it was during this time that I grew to have a really deep understanding of the word ally. And what I realized that this means is that being an ally is using my privilege, my access to resources and power, to stand in solidarity with people who are often ignored, who are often forgotten, who are often dehumanized and discriminated, and lending whatever talent I may have in service of a vision for a just and a compassionate and equitable world. And these days I have a very specific way of being an ally. As I have stabilized as an immigrant, and as I have grown in my marriage to a wonderful man, I have another best friend who cannot enjoy or experience the privileges that I do. He too is also Filipino, he's undocumented, and he is gay and HIV positive. And this is a best friend who I grew up with, who I would walk along UP Avenue before, thinking about what we would be when we grow up, thinking about taking over the world together. And when I think about how unstable, insecure, violent his life is, I know that whatever safety and security I've accomplished at that surface. One, I learned that I really need to engage the world, to respond to the issues of my time and contribute to the conversation of ideas and values that will be really about what kind of world we want to live in. I also learned that I have to have humility and listen to the community and draw my sense of conviction from the experiences of many and not just my own. And lastly, I think I learned to be open to the gifts of people around me, to accept their love and their support. Because oftentimes I felt like I didn't need help. But in the end, I realized that the love and support that they provided me was so that I could turn around and provide that to the people who have less privilege than me, and be able to use my status to support the people without a voice and who are at the margins. Love cannot remain by itself, because by itself it has no meaning. Love has to be put into action, and that action is service. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Salma. As everybody know, I won't tell all my background as it's already in the paper when I look at, when I came to United States and all. But anyhow, to be a speaker after Aimee, this is incredible. You know, she has done so much. She's almost as old as my daughter. And I'm 66, and I'm sure, and as a young Filipino woman, what she has accomplished is incredible. And I take my hat off. And the experience she had in the Philippines was something to be jealous for, especially me. I didn't have chance at all to do what she has done. I was so busy all the time studying, college, and then after that, you wanted to go abroad to further your studies. So unfortunately, I didn't do any of the things she did, which I wish I did, but I'm compromising by doing it here in the United States for my children and for the future youth. It doesn't matter what religious belief, what ethnicity, background, and that's what I do right now. But there's one thing that I did in the Philippines that I still carry to this moment, And that every summer, my father let us work in the village. We have a big farm, and so we were taught how to plant from rice to corn, to every single, from tomato to eggplant, everything. And my father has taught me something that I treasure the most to this moment, and that is respect for the earth that God has given you. And when I work with the tenants, my mother used to cry, literally. She said, that's why we have tenants for, because your daughters, just me, we have 3 sisters, I have 2 sisters, they're going to be dark, you know, in the field, you know how that goes, it's so hot. And that's why we have tenants. I don't want them to become dark. So I said, Mama, what difference does it make, you know, if I'm dark or light? I said, no, you have to be light skinned. It doesn't make any difference. But then my father intervened, and he said, Ma, we have to teach the children now. If you and me are gone, who will teach them then? It is the time is now. In the Quran, which is a book like the Torah and the Bible, it plainly clears God has said the woman has equal right with the man. We have right to higher education. We have right to our properties. We have right to own what we have before marriage. So what has happened after 9/11? I tripled my effort. We founded Bilal Mosque Association in Beaverton. And I'm sure everybody have heard about the Portland 7. They happened to go to the Bilal Mosque. And the recent one, and the most serious one, is Brandon Mayfield's case. I only travel agency just for hobby. You have to have no hobby, no nothing. And Christine was the FBI agent, and she came in, and well, first she came in 11, and she smiled and said, I'm expecting you. And I said, I know Brandon Mayfield. The third question you're going to ask me, is it one-way ticket? I said, yes, Christine, it's one-way ticket. You know why? They don't know whether they're going to come back to America or not. They go by semester, by year. These are the 3 things. So what do you expect? Then he laughed, and then he said, can I sit down? I said, sure, you know. And I know what you're going to ask me next. And I copied in the USA Today the photos of the 11 people that blew the tower in New York. I made a copy. I pulled it out under my desk. You're going to ask me if I knew any of this. No, I don't. Every single question I anticipated, I already have an answer. So then she smiled and she said, you know, you answered all my questions because I know I'm expecting you. Because this is natural, you're going to ask me. Okay, this is terrorism. And he smiled and he said, that was the easiest job I ever did. Instead of her asking me a question, I give the answer first because I know what she's going to ask. So after that moment, and I realized we have to do something, the Muslim community. Number 1, to erase the stereotyping of the Muslim woman. Number 2, how can we engage with the government agencies and government officials? We are being spied. So anyhow, this is how I got involved with this, and I went to the FBI and decided that I would like to find out what the agency is all about, and I enrolled in the academy. This is when a bridge of trust between the agency and us. So finally, 3 of them I invited, and the first thing I asked, I would like to request, please do not plant any more spy in the mosque. If you need to find out a certain person, come and see us. And these are the names of all the leaders and the imams of different mosques and organizations. Call them, this is their email, right in front. And I called everybody in my house. This is when the new director said, Salma, it's really helpful, you know, it's making our job easy. I said, it's making your job easy, it's giving me peace of mind. This is, you know, I got a signal from Eric, my time is up, I have so much to talk about, but Human Rights Council is different. Until now in World Affairs Council, I'm just having 2 judges from Moldova in a few days. I host them as well, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Anyhow, good luck to all the young folks. We don't have a lot of young folks, and hopefully that the experience that I shared you, that they really can learn. Peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salma. I think we're getting a sense of why we called it Pinay Power. I think we're getting a sense of that. Thank you, Salma. And yes, and it's okay. We went a little bit over time, but I think Aimee's 2 minutes was given to you, so it balances out. Thank you. Now we'll have Pia. She's currently a student of Master of Arts in Theology at the Mount Angel Seminary. And her background, more educational background, she hails from Ateneo in Manila. I see a hand going up there saying Ateneo is a good thing. Yeah. Yes, now 2 hands. Major in philosophy, both as a student and as an undergrad and graduate, and also taught there for, I can't remember how many years, but
I'll tell you what it is. It is my serendipity. It really distresses me. You can ask my husband. I will call him in the afternoon and I will say, I'll be going to Fred Meyer first. Why? You just went to the grocery store. And I would say, well, I need to relax. So that's what I do. I go to the grocery store to relax. But it's, you know, related to my love for cooking and my love for entertaining and my love for hospitality. Well, today is really a privilege to be in front of you and share something about myself and my work that could help define leadership and Pinay power based on my experiences. Many of you know me by face, by name, or by meeting me at the Mrs. Philippines dancing. But I bet that most of you do not really know who I am. Many times I am in the background. And I think this is one time a great opportunity for me to share a little bit more of who I am and why I do what I do. I've always thought that my life was boring. You know, when my son was a young boy, he used to ask me, so, Mom, what do you really do? I would simply answer, Anak, I meet with people and I talk with them. This seemingly ordinary act is really fundamental to all of my endeavors as a community organizer, a pastoral minister, and a teacher. I was only 14 years old when my brothers went to the church for a youth group. And I've always had a protected life. I couldn't even get out of the gate without any permission. But I was so curious. I was wondering why my brothers could do those things and I can't. Fast forward in 1978, the Archdiocese of Manila under the leadership of Jaime Cardinal Sin convened a synod of bishops to reflect and deliberate on how the new changes of Vatican II could be implemented in the Church of the Philippines. I was 19 and the youngest delegate to the synod. A few months later, a couple of years later, I graduated. I was going to graduate from the Ateneo. My professor from the philosophy department approached me in the hallway and curiously asked me what my plans were after college. I said, I hope to teach or go into law. Well, why don't you teach here? We want you. So I was stupefied. Can you imagine learning philosophy in Tagalog? Well, imagine teaching philosophy in Tagalog. I did that for 5 years. One major period in our history that had a profound effect on my life was the People Power Revolution, just like Aimee did, only I was older than her already by that time. Although I was living in Japan already with my husband and son, this historical and momentous event gripped my heart and soul as someone who had been so much a part of the events that led to it. It was during these years also that the understanding and commitment to social justice was developed. In 1992, we made another leap. We moved to the United States directly, coming to Portland. To be honest, I was very wary of getting involved because of all the presuppositions about Filipinos in the US. But one of the highlights of organizing with the larger community in Oregon has been the time that I spoke for the migrant farm workers here in Oregon. We were asking for $1 million as a line item in the budget for housing for farm workers. And that was mostly for the Hispanics. But I think what happened there was when I spoke for that, I was speaking with all the Filipinos that came before us who were working for farm workers and for labor unions back in California, who have really led the way in defining a better future for our Hispanic and basically all the immigrant farm workers in the country. In 1997, I started the Filipino faith community. It was only a dream, and I think most of you know what it has done in the last 15 years. But there's something that you need to know about it. We have no membership, because all of you are members. We have no structure, because all of us are empowered leaders. We have no bank account, because we rely on the organized generosity of each and every Filipino. And what have we done? We have built 2 Oregon villages for Gawad Kalinga. We have gathered 25 parishes, or no, maybe even more parishes and organizations to come together. And we have done the Dambana. The Dambana is really, when you think about it, an embodiment of the growing fulfillment of the original dream for the unity of the Filipino people here in Oregon. And in coming full circle, I have been invited to be part of the good governance. Basically, I've gotten involved with that because of what Eric said, for my desire for the Filipinos to fall in love again with the Philippines. Because there is so much to be done. And so I say, as the people in my past have affected me, we are not the history. We are only moments in history. Thank you.
She's on the board of Toys for Kids Foundation, where she's able to interact with folks who are serving time at the state penitentiary, involved in the rehab, helping the children in need in the community. She's also involved in neighborhood associations. She's been involved with Gawad Kalinga, Habitat for Humanity, and also deeply involved in parish activities. Involved in the Filipino community. FANHS is one organization that she's been involved with and still involved with. She's been going to CFAA meetings, and certainly a big asset to CFAA. And boy, I'm just glad that she's involved in the Filipino community. Her passions, is to gain skills at influencing people's attitudes so that there's concern for universal issues. I guess broadening your view, looking at the big picture and say, hey, what's really good for this? What's really the greater good for the greater number? A regard for the basic good, not for one's benefit, but for the benefit of the bigger community. And I know that game, Bejeweled. Anybody knows the game Bejeweled?
Yes.
Yeah, she plays that. I don't know why. I've tried playing that. I can do it once or twice and say, okay, I'll do something else. But she's addicted to that, so she does that. She watches TV and she says she can practically relate every story or a movie or a TV show that she's watched. So there's that's what she does when she's not busy saving the world from itself. So anyway, without much ado, here's Dolly. Hello, Dolly.
That's, like you said, Salma, it's kind of always hard to follow other people. But before I have to do this is me, okay? People that know me, I'm very administrative and I'm very OCD. I like things to be just the way they are. Camera angles, I have to fix. Where's my step?
Too far.
Too far? I can only stay here?
Yes.
Up to here?
You want me to put a mark?
See, Ferdy, because he said, don't move around so that he can sit down and take a break because he didn't want to move the camera. So, am I okay?
Yeah, you're okay there.
Up to here? Okay, that's my mark. So I cannot go past that mark, but I can walk around. Okay. I actually had prepared speeches, just like them, written. But in light of just my recent life, I just cross it all out, everything. So I did index cards while we had speakers speaking. And pretend, it's like, like any other experience, I will be like, as Aimee said, the mindless comic relief. That's my role this afternoon. And, everything, just like the song says, what comes up must come down. I am your wind down act. Because these women that preceded me are so awesome. For that matter, all the people who have stood in this stage for FANHS have all been awesome. And have all been role models. And have all been people I want to be. Tita Medi, Tita Angie Colastin, Tita Marisa. And in true Filipino fashion, they're all titas. And just so you know, this is my rule. Anybody who's a generation and over is tita. Anybody who's much older than that becomes manang. Okay? I do not do sis. Don't like the sis thing. It's freaky to me. I don't say that. So I don't refer to people as sis. Although I welcome when people say that. And the reason for that, and I'm never ate, okay? To everyone else, in case you know, I'm called Tita Dolly or Tadal. Because my kids would always say, Tada! Because I was always maarte. Which, if you don't know that, means I like to act. I was always a performer. I am the youngest of 11 children. You've read that. In a family that's strong. So much so, that's where my assertiveness comes from. Because I always had to fight for my spot. Nobody listened. My parents, typical, would instill in us, or the way the house worked, I don't know how it is with you, was seniority. Because both my parents were professionals, they were executives, and even my mother was, the type. And it wasn't common in my mother's era. But she was a head, she was a top executive, she was a head of Basic Books, which then was the distributor of Time Life series and all those encyclopedias. So she managed that, so that was my role model. My mother was a professional person, matching everything, went to the office. I had yayas, or I had a yaya. I was born with my yaya. My mother delivered me, handed me to my yaya. And I had my yaya until my children were born. So that was my relation. My closest brother is 4 years older. My closest sister is 8 years older. So in the family, I didn't really have familiar relationships. I grew up with my friends, neighbors. I was, in Filipino terms, kalat. Hindi ako kalagkarin. That's different. Just kalat, layas. That's it. That's it, layas. I was never, ever home. It was the yaya's job to always find me at the end of the day because we also had a rule in our house at 6 p.m. was always rosary. It didn't matter where you came from. So, in short, what I'm saying is, unlike the rest of the speakers, my life is so totally different. And actually, I would really say it was shameful. It's not my entire growing up years, however much fun it was, it's not exactly something I could really be very proud of. Like I said, being the youngest, indulgent, spoiled by everyone. All my older brothers and sisters who started working gave me allowance. So I was never wanting for money, never knew how to ask for money. in consequence, never knew how to handle it either. Just spent it. I have money, I spent. I have money, I spent. It was just that. I had no struggles in life, Aimee. You said earlier, when you had that play, you were referring to Aimee Marcos and all those people, and that play was directed towards those people. Guess what? That play would have been directed towards me, because I was one of those. I was one of those rich kids, lived in privilege, lived nothing. I had bodyguards, because those were the kind, that was my social circle. That was my world. The people I knew, the people I eventually thought my life was going to be growing up, was going to be, I marry some rich guy that was always in my social circle. I'll be a majongera. You know, I'd be one of the blue ladies, which is what it was then, you know, the amigas of Imelda Marcos, they were called blue ladies. That was my exposure. That was my world. Pia was, you know, kind of like there. I would never have seen Pia either, because my involvement with church was really of social nature. I go to church because all my barcadas would go to church. I would go to church at the churches, at the masses, where it was shortest, depending on what my social calendar said. Which, by the way, in my time, Magallanes village had the shortest mass at 15 minutes or 30, diba? But, you know, the parties were there. I grew up in the same home, which is in San Miguel Village, which, if you're familiar with the Philippines, you know, it's in the affluent zone. I went to Assumption, which, oh, by the way, this is actually my high school skirt. As in, literally, my high school skirt that I cut up so that I could use a sash and other accessories. Because every single year, and this time, I usually travel to some reunion somewhere for my Assumption reunion. Every single year, and I'm missing it this year, today, to be here. So in solidarity with my Assumption girlfriends, because it will have to be on Facebook, they will have to see that I'm wearing uniform today. Okay? Now, Assumption, briefly touching that, is a school that was originally founded by French nuns, and literally the mission statement was to educate the children of nobility. So we get teased by all the other Kalayala schools that finishing school lang kami, because it was a socially, well, they're laughing at me now because they know. But it was that. It was really stressed. But you know, we wore it proudly. Because the idea then was women were not going to be leaders, but we were mothers of leaders, we were sisters of leaders, and we were daughters of leaders. Therefore, we had influence. It was never thought of that we would be someday leaders. Doing social work, like Aimee did to start for herself, like you did for your village, was, like you said, innate. I'm ashamed to say, not for me. I did social work because it was a school requirement. It was ICAP course. You have to pass it. So I'd go in elementary school time. I would go to orphanages and play with kids, then come home. In the, you know, towards the high school, it was whatever the projects were that the nuns set out for us to do. So that was what we did. Social responsibility, slogan lang yan. Gimmick lang yan, you know. It was not something I could relate to. So let's fast forward even. As an adult, I've established I'm a very social person. That was really my life. But I'm organized. I am a leader. I like to plan all the parties. I was party central. You know, I was like, if there's a party, I knew where it was because I organized everybody's party and I routed people depending on where to go. You know, progressively. That was my life. I thought, even in college, I thought I was also progressive because in college, especially if you're going to colegio, and the reason why I also went to Assumption all the way through college is because I didn't want to have to work, honestly, not because of education, that you feel most Filipinos think you pursue education because it's important. I went to Assumption because I liked the uniform. And I I went to Assumption not only because I liked the uniform, was because I was too lazy to decide what to wear. I was accepted in Ateneo, I was accepted in UP. And then the other thing also was, I didn't have a driver by then, our driver retired, but I had a car. But then my mom said, if you're going to UP or you're going to Ateneo, you cannot drive the car. See, it was gas rationing at that time. So I wouldn't have enough gas to last me to go to and from school. So I said, well, if that's the case, how far can the car take me on my gas allowance? She goes, well, Assumption. So I said, well, heck yeah, I'll stay in Assumption then. So I drove myself to and from school. So clearly you can see all my motivations in life skewed because I had my purpose was whatever was going to come was going to be it. I did not lay it for myself. And certainly even if I laid it for myself, it was not going to be for the benefit of others. So let's fast forward even. As an adult, I've established I'm a very social person. That was really my life. But I'm organized. I was 23. That was in my timeline. I actually had a timeline for my life. It was like, you know, such and such age, I will get married, and the groom is whoever. Was time ready to get married, then pipili, you know, I'll choose. When I was 23, I had 3 marriage proposals literally on the table. I was engaged to someone else. And then I met my husband. And yeah, if you read that thing, it was a fortune teller. That's a true story. And I met my husband, and his selling point was he offered me adventure and anonymity. My husband offered me, come to the US, and you be somebody, you can be who you want to be. When I first moved to the States, I was not in any Filipino community whatsoever because my husband was, well, is white. He still is white. And all the neighborhoods we lived in was all puti, all white. My involvement started and evolved through the children, in school, in the neighborhood, because of what was needed. Like Aimee said, you step up and you respond to the needs of the times. Still, it was not grand vision of, oh, I want to make a difference or whatever. None of those things. Until, and mind you, I've always been active. Church, neighborhood, schools, corporate, everything. And I was working. And one day I was lecturing at Mass, and Pia discovers me. So she is actually the person you could thank, you know, if you want to thank her for my involvement in the Filipino community. However, she's the person I blame for my involvement in the Filipino community. Because now, being involved in the Filipino community presented a whole new world all over. You know, I was perfectly fine. I was so involved anyway. And this was a new chapter, a new thing. But true to form, I'm a worker. I'm a functioning, I can't join just to join. So I had to tell her, what do I have to do? What do you need from me? It has to be a task. It has to be something that has a beginning and an end. So that's what I did. The first time was for Gawad Kalinga. The second was Dambana. And then joining even for FANHS, which has always been my passion anyway. I really, really, really like history. And like you said, to give meaning. Wala pa rin yung to give meaning. To me, it was just to tell a story. Listening to people tell a story. During the book signings that I've done, there are, you know, the people who come who have no single Filipino friend, doesn't know anything about us. That's what I'm passionate about. And I really listen to other people. And again, I know I get criticized for it, but I love listening to the greater white community and being involved there, because when I'm with them and they look at me and I'm able to say, no, I'm Filipino, it impresses them on behalf of everyone else around me. And I find myself really, that's what's exciting. During the book signings that I've done, there are, you know, the people who come who have no single Filipino friend, doesn't know anything about us. That's what I'm passionate about. And I'm in a room full of people just like me, I'm sure. Passionate, clearly. And the rest of you have been here, who have been here for so long, and you have done so much. You know, let's precisely, that's it. I'm simply a person. I'll walk out of this stage, I'll walk out of this room, I'll walk out of the community. I just want to know for everyone that I made a difference in your life. I don't have grandiose plans or whatever. Just so that you can say, oh, I know Dolly, and you know what? She did something good for me. That's really all I want. I want to be able to walk away and say, I did good in the room where I was. And that's it. Thank you so much. Can I ask you, okay, I'm officially cut, okay? Now it's kind of like a function. I didn't do, the presidential address because we've done this over and over again. There's a little thing, Cindy, next to you. If you have time, because we'll just break, for 10 minutes before Q&A, because I know you have been.
So what is your opinion about the topics of homosexuality in the Catholic Church?
I truly believe in the teaching of the church that every human being has an innate dignity. Therefore, whether you are gay, lesbian, straight, whatever, you are an image of God. And you ought to be loved.
I know there are Shia and Sunnis, but in the Oregonian recently they were talking about what we consider Muslims here but were not recognized in the Middle East. I forgot the name.
Group of Muslims, the Quran has, it's very, very clear that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, peace be upon him, is the last prophet to come to earth, and the message of God is completed.
I know that upon the adjournment of this symposium, you will not be the FANHS president anymore because you resigned. My question is, what happened to the Pinay power?
My Pinay power is not limited to one direction. I will continue to be as effective as I was before you knew me, before I got involved in FANHS, before I got involved in this community or whatever. I have always been in motion and making a contribution wherever I'm at.
Maybe you can consider me selfish, but we help the poor. We'd like to, but they also have to know the responsibility.
Thank you for that question. It's brilliant, and probably something that I struggle with as well all throughout my work. I know that the work is complex because the roots of the problems are complex. We know that it's not just one person contributing to that, to the problem. It's a whole host of factors. It's also institutionalized. It's also our history of policies. It's also the leaders that we have, or the kind of leadership that we've shown. And so similarly, I think our solutions need to be comprehensive and need to go beyond individuals.
I think to be pragmatic about it, especially for us here in the US, who have always been asked to help. I think we need to be critical also of the kind of help that we are giving. Are we just giving a handout, or are we giving a handout? So we choose the way we help, because if it's going to only perpetuate the system, then it doesn't help. You will always have the petty thief. You will always have the one who would try to make lamang the other.
Power. I want to know more a little bit on how, in your work or in your involvement in a community, how you have empowered, involved, or changed. It could be a specific example or a program or an avenue where you have empowered, changed, or inspired.
There's this mistrust between, every time, especially the African-American Muslim and Latinos, every time they see a patrol car on Northeast, they hide, they run, they don't know whether they get arrested or not, because there is a racial profiling, which the police department finally admitted, yes, there is. So what we did with this council, 2 years it lasted, I brought them and met with the Latinos who were so scared to see police officers in the center. gonna be in the list, no-fly list, or question mark list, whatever list.
If there is a full audience here today, what do you expect for these people that are present here today do for what has been presented?
I think my expectations are modest and simple, and that is to engage another person, whether it's a fellow Filipino or a fellow Portlander, about what their stories are and what their life journey is. Because I think many of you were surprised by our life stories and would not have thought to think that those were the stories that brought us here to Portland. And so I think similarly, by hearing people's stories, you learn much about yourself and about the community that we live in.
I'm hopeful, you know, I'm a vision of hope. I like to think that. And I want you to walk away like everything else. Like I said, make a difference. I like to make a difference in people's life. If all you did today, as far as me is concerned, is walk away and say, now you know me better, then I did what I set out to do.
I myself learned something from today, and that the bottom line of what these women do is to be a good human being. And I hope each one of you will walk out to remember what we have done, and that it can be a role model that the young ones can emulate, and hoping that they can also be.
We know that the youth is our next future. We got a certain amount of life in this planet, and they're going to substitute us. What kind of a message you guys got for them to induce that energy into them?
I want us to also challenge ourselves with the idea that the youth are apathetic. Because I actually work with a lot of youth, and I find so much fire and energy in them, and I'm inspired by them and the work that they do. And I find them to be very visionary.
We need to really understand that these are not, we have to stop considering the young people the leaders of the future. Because in my experience from PSU Kaibigan and being at Northwest Plaza, they're leaders now. They're leaders today. They are our equal. If you put yourself in the right environment, these kids will run laps around me. They put me to shame.
Just briefly, I was in West African exchange program, coming from a white middle-class background in Texas, changing the perceptions that I have. So the question I have for perceptions, what are a couple of the main misperceptions, do you think, that the general American public has about Muslims in America?
What in Oregon we do as a Muslim community, every time an American family comes to host them, we meet with them, and they're the one that's interested to know the culture. Let's say example one, which is very basic. They can't have a dog. I mean, they can, if you have a dog, then it's hard for them. They can't live in there. And then they can't have pork. They can't have alcohol. Those are three main things. And we encourage the host family, if they have a chance, to take them on Friday prayers. If not, it's okay also. But I think what has happened, and it has brought to the American people, is more understanding and tolerance of the Muslim community. And of course, Bush has done other things, but this is one good thing that he did, open up to the Muslim country and bring the children, the youth, and they go back to their country and they say, oh gee, you know, American people are really great, because right now we are bad in the Muslim world. They tell me right in my face, you're American, holding an American passport, why are you guys all the time bombing us and occupying us? You know, this is a blunt question. And yet I'm one of them, but I am an American. But this opportunity like you, that you take Muslim students, they bring back to their country. And they say American people are the best. They're so charitable, they're so understanding, they're so loving, and one word, they're very passionate.
All right, thank you very much. Now, I really just like to close it by thanking our panelists. Salma, thank you very much. Dolly, thank you very much. Aimee, it's been a wonderful day. And thank you to everybody. I think it's been a wonderful interaction this afternoon. I do go back.